Hello. Welcome to a series that I'm going to call Monogamous Seductress. This is a term that has come to me as soon as I pretty much launched Vulcanability. And what I see it means is a woman who wants to pleasure one man, be in love with one person at a time, and wants to put their all for a relationship. So if that's you, I'm hoping in this series to really speak to women about their bodies, about what it means to feel safe in their bodies. Sorry, especially as you are experiencing pleasure. So today our topic is going to be the good girl, which is something I think many of us are pretty familiar with, but let's jump into it. Okay, so here we have the good girl. So what this means is whenever you're in a state of intimacy with your partner, you might start to feel maybe some inklings of shame, guilt. Am I doing something wrong? Is this really okay for me to be experiencing this? Like, am I able to be touched there? And that's supposed to feel good. All these kinds of subtle questions start coming up to the surface because we've been really conditioned, especially as women, to be very mm, how would I describe this? Very submissive in general. So as soon as the idea of owning your own pleasure comes up, there's definitely a lot of shame that can also surface with that. So here's some of the outlines that we're going to go through, what it is to mean that you have a good girl syndrome, programmed thinking, what it switch on, switch off. Pro does not mean good girl, meaning prostitute. Shadows exploration, and then wrap up. So let's go with what is the good girl syndrome. So the good girl shows up in intimate moments and can come with feelings of shame, guilt, or overall vulgar associations for the body or act that she is engaged in. So despite you actually enjoying the sensation or wanting to engage with it further, she becomes distracted with self-conscious thoughts of impurity. So maybe this sounds like you. Maybe you've been in a moment of extended pleasure, and then all of a sudden you're thinking like, oh my gosh, is this all right? Is this good? You know, I have always grown up being told you're not supposed to play there, and and I'm not supposed to be touched there, and all these other feelings might arise with that. So that actually inhibit you from experiencing pleasure. So this could be really common, and I'm sure there are women out here who definitely can resonate with these types of feelings during intimacy, even if it's with somebody you really love. It could be honestly not even associated with your partner. It can truly be something that you've just picked up from other people growing up. All right, so this is where we get into this program thinking. You've probably all heard this as well. Close your knees, button up, make sure your posture and everything, your hands are kind of folded and on your lap and all these things that are certain kind of demeanors as a woman in society. So if we think about closing your knees, when we grow up as young women, we are always reminded that good girls keep their legs crossed. While this does have its purpose when wearing skirts and sitting down, not really exposing yourself when you don't want to, its undertone is one of chastity, and it has a heavier meaning than just physically like keeping you protected. It's more about like make sure you don't allow anybody down there. So this is again, it's a mechanism to keep us safe because again, we don't want to be exposing ourselves to people we don't trust and we don't want in our private spaces. But at the same time, it's also taken on a heavier meaning that we are not supposed to enjoy anything down there. We're not supposed to be connected to it as a place of sacred space, sacred pleasure. So if we think about buttoning up, if we, as we grow up, our breasts become a major source of self-conscious or confidence, depending on where you are with your body. Another hyper awareness is keeping our necklines high and buttoned up. Otherwise, we receive unwanted attention and we are seen to actually be calling in that attention. I know that I experience this a lot with people wanting to always comment on like what style of tops I wear or like how they are exposing me. At the same time, I just naturally have a larger chest area, so it's a bit difficult to always be finding things that are extremely covered up without feeling like I am sacrificing my expression of the self. So a lot of the times when we are, maturing, this area of the body can be extremely intimidating because you're potentially comparing to other women. You don't really know what you're supposed to look like or feel like. Everyone's kind of staring and just hyper focused on that area. So maybe even if you are younger, you can find older men looking at you there, and then you don't really feel comfortable anymore. I mean, they have a lot of influences as to why we get these advice to remain, I guess, pure and good girl way like style, but at the same time, it comes at the cost of when we are in the bedroom with a partner that we love and are feeling safe with, because we can't really disassociate the narrative that we're being forced to swallow, essentially, and the experience of letting ourselves go and just releasing. So that brings me to my next point, which is the switch on or off. So sex in general is pretty unspoken. We don't talk about sensuality. If sensuality, when sensuality is something we are not embodying, it is difficult to activate it on demand for ourselves, for our partner, especially if it's associated and it calls in the feelings of shame or dirtiness. So let's say you're kind of in the peak of arousal, and then you immediately think of like, oh my goodness, I was taught in like third or fourth grade that this is not right for you or something. And that immediately like drops you out of the moment. And then your pleasure is affected. And then all of that starts to really snowball and take a toll on your sex life, because once again, you're not really being present with the person that's there in front of you. You're being more caught up in the memories and the associations that you've been taught to have around sex and the experience of intimacy versus actually just experiencing it for what it is in your life in this moment. So when we think about it from this perspective, we now can invite the idea of practice. Becoming intimate with yourself is the first step to deepening your relationship to pleasure with another person, because then you can guide them. No matter how experienced another person is, they're never going to know exactly what you like, because each person is entirely different. And your needs and desires might actually change over the years. You might experience pleasure in certain areas a lot more, and then later on you develop curiosities for new areas and you gravitate toward those, and then maybe you lean away and like shift over to another area of your body or another style of intimacy with your partner. So it's always going to be shifting. It's pretty dynamic. It's like it's a live process, because if you think about it, the energy of sex is kundalini energy, and it's like electricity running through our bodies all the time. So we have to be adaptable, and to think that we can have these concepts, these identities of a good girl, and we can just kind of shut her up and put her aside when we're back in the bedroom with our partners is a bit silly, because if we're not taking care of her, she feels left out of the equation, and then it's going to be again like a subconscious voice, almost like it's not going to be a subconscious voice. It's going to be almost like this quiet voice in the back of your mind, even as you're engaging in intimacy. So the best way to deal with this is again practicing with yourself what it means to be intimate, what it means to feel pleasure, and noticing that shame that arises with you, and just allowing your body to really feel it, and even actually expand it throughout your body. Let your entire body feel shame, because I promise you, if you let yourself do this in a safe space with just yourself at first, perhaps, or the partner, if you're feeling comfortable, you're actually able to transmute that feeling. Because if you allow your body to sense it, that's when you can truly release it from the body. All right, so this section is called Pro Does Not Equal Good Girl. And what I mean here is that a lot of the times we think if we let go of the good girl identity, that automatically means we are on the other side of the spectrum. Like that means that we are very loose people and we sleep around because a lot of the times in our culture, in order for somebody to be viewed as sexually liberated, it tends to mean that they have to sleep with either a lot of partners or at the same time or multiple people across their lives. So immediately we can assume the fear of being called or labeled something um, that's not true for us. Like, let's say being called a prostitute or assuming the identity that you like sex because you are dirty or you are something that should be shamed. You are supposed to be objectified essentially because you enjoy the material side of life and pleasure and so forth. So I just want to caution here that that's not true, that that's not equal to this reality. Just because you're going to let go of the good girl identity during moments of intimacy with your trusted partner in the bedroom, you can allow the pro identity to truly just drop. All right. So that brings us to the shadows exploration, which I'm excited about because in order for us to let go of her and bring out like her expression in a healthy way, because it's not bad to have this sort of poise and elegance, but it's just not really helpful when you want to let go and enjoy yourself in a primal way, which is required in intimacy. So with these shadows explorations, we want to look at ourselves, see maybe how we are contributing to the chaos within us. And you can ask yourself, how am I repelling pleasure in my life? You can maybe journal on this, meditate, ponder, do with you what you wish with this. But I definitely encourage you to expand these questions in your life, maybe get a little bit creative, and connect to them, connect to the answers because they might actually surprise you. The next one is, am I concerned with how others will perceive me if they find out about my personal desires? And therefore, will I be judged for my likings? So I'm going to read that again because it's a pretty long question. Am I concerned with how others will perceive me if they find out about my personal desires? And therefore, because of my personal desires and that the public found out, will I be judged for what I like to do? And then does that fear, does that worry stop you or me, if I'm asking myself, does that worry stop me from exploring areas that I'm curious about? So this is actually a really big deal because many times we don't notice that we're not letting ourselves explore something because we are afraid that somebody might find out. And it's not even about the partner necessarily that we're with, but it's more about the judgment of other people. And the idea of sensuality, sacred sensuality, is that you can be vulnerable with your partner to such an extent that you all are just exploring yourselves. And not allowing the influence of external situations, people, judgments, stories, anecdotes, whatever, get in the way of you and your partner, which is a sacred bond. And within that sacred bond, you should be allowed to explore any desire that you both feel comfortable exploring. So these are just some ways to dip into your toes with the shadow exploration. As you can imagine, you can really become friends with this identity. So as we wrap up, let me talk about does your good girl come or out during intimacy? Ask yourself this. Notice the next time you're becoming intimate. Maybe there's a certain move or a certain feeling that you immediately notice shows up that is associated with the good girl identity when something happens, when your partner does this, or when you're touched like this, whatever. So just start noticing, bring awareness to the moments of sensuality. Does your good girl come out during intimacy? Can you begin to make friends with this identity inside of you? Its desire is to keep you safe and pure. So if we are recognizing what the purpose of this identity is, we can just acknowledge it and let her be a part of us because we don't want to remove the good girl identity. It does keep us, elegant. It keeps us graceful in life. And it doesn't mean that we are kind of exposing ourselves to everybody outside of the partner that we want to be with. So its desire is to really keep us innocent. It's to keep us clean of the impurities that perhaps sensuality can bring up for certain people. So asking yourselves these questions can invite a conversation with this identity, and you can start to become friends with it. You can say, how is this helping me? How can I even become playful about this identity in the bedroom? Can I bring in maybe some costumes or some role play in to have her also play with this if you feel comfortable again, and definitely after some shadow work. How has she kept you safe? This is a great question to segue again into a gratitude space for this identity. Learning how it's a part of you and it's always going to exist within you, and that's okay because it's also good. We have polite manners and conservative clothing, or for the most part, in public spaces and in private, there are no holds bars. So there's a difference between external world and then the internal world of your relationship and your intimacy. How can you develop a sense of camaraderie with this good girl inside of you? How can you become besties with this woman and allow her to really be quiet when you want to be intimate and ravenous with your partner? All right, I hope you found this enlightening, and there will be definitely more of the Monogamous Seductress series for my channel. Thank you, and have a magical day.